Hey, dear hearts, it's so nice that we're all together today, and I'm so excited to bring one of my favorite people in the entire world here with us to talk about one of the area that some of us really struggle with, the inner critic. So let me introduce one of my besties, author Andrea Patten, and she is a creative problem solver. And as a licensed addiction counselor, her unique blend of clinical and business skills helped her to excel in a niche more familiar to those with business, startups, and turnarounds. She's been instrumental in the success of more than a dozen innovative programs, and Andrea has spoken at regional and national events about developing strategies to embrace healthy change. She's received the State of Vermont's Commissioner's Award for pioneering services for families, and her love of marketing and customer service has roots in her family's nationwide real estate business. More recently, Andrea's turned to writing full-time. So after co-authoring What Kids Need to Succeed, 4 Foundations for Adult Achievement, she created related workshops and training programs. Fascinated by social media, she regularly blogs on topics related to her personal growth and is only occasionally flummoxed by technology. Andrea also enjoys permaculture, the beach, her dogs, her favorite husband, Larry, and, well, self-care for advocates. So I'm so excited you're with us today. Hi, friend.
Hi, friend. I'm always happy to have a conversation with you and sometimes even to have it on a screen. But it's good to be here.
Thank you so much. And what I didn't mention when I was going over with your bio, you are a major component to SCFA. You have been with me since the very beginning, just about when we were a Facebook group, and as we have grown and changed into a nonprofit. So and you have been instrumental on the board of directors. So thank you for being here and just for everything that you've done for us. I really appreciate you.
It's has to do with some of the better give and take in the world, because I get so much out of this. You know, some things have changed in my life and I'm not able to physically face-to-face do advocacy, but I have a passion for supporting advocates. You know, too many of us are put into too many dangerous, life-threatening situations without appropriate support that I couldn't not be on your board, Trace, unless I do something really dumb and you have to get rid of me, which is always a possibility. But I love being part of it. I love seeing the growth. I love going through our ups and downs and renegotiating what we're doing and how we're doing it and all of that sort of thing. And I'm excited for what the next steps are going to look like. And of course, the conference. This conference is so near and dear to my heart. So
it's a really great space that we're creating and growing. I'm so grateful for it. And, you know, advocacy has been a massively important part, a foundation of my life. And to move into this direction is a gift for me. And I know that it's really meaningful to so many people. Before we jump in, I know people will be interested in knowing a little bit more about your advocacy experiences. I know that addictions counseling was a huge part, but you also did domestic violence work as well, right?
I did child protection, domestic violence, and sexual assault for a long time. And to back up a little bit, it was very clear to me from early on in my addictions work that trauma was a huge piece of what most of our clients were dealing with. At the time, because I'm even older than I look, we're talking about addicted Vietnam vets in an inpatient setting. And most of the clinicians were saying things like, you have to focus exclusively on your addiction. And I would say, and the vet centers and the places that were sending them to us were saying, this is a huge trauma, and drinking and drugging is only a side effect, a small piece of what people are dealing with. And I was the one saying, how about we deal with both? Because they're both important, and you can't succeed with one without dealing with the other, which wherever you want to start. So, that was way back in the early 80s. And it's something that carried with me. I, at that time, proposed that I was helping to run an inpatient program for families of addicts in the same facility. And I proposed that we start thinking about some of the children of alcoholics the same way we were thinking about the Vietnam veterans, which, got me sidelined a few times because, what are you, stupid? I don't have enough formal credentials to get credibility on these things when they're new ideas coming to me. So from there, I worked almost exclusively in addictions for a period of time. And of course, was seeing victims of domestic violence and sexual assault and their kids. And again, running into the same thing with clinicians. So a lot of where that was an inpatient place. I want to back up a little bit because I got a tremendous education. Also working in a program where through child welfare, where safe reunification was the focus. Safe reunification of kids with addicted parents. So the deal there was to get the parents set up in some sort of solid recovery so we could bring the kids home. Tremendous program, awesome people. I'm still in touch with most of them. That's where the idea about having your crucial 3 people that no matter what you're doing, if they say, I need, call me, I need you, you drop everything and you do it. And, those people saved my life and whatever shreds of my sanity I have left over and over again. And from there, I went to running a combined program, DV-SV program, which covered a county that was about 800 square miles with 3.5 full-time staff and a whole bunch of volunteers. So
you walk the walk.
A little bit, yeah.
It's, I think that's so important for advocates when we're coming together to be, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why I love us having this conference is to be around people who get it, people who have walked the walk. And with that experience that you had, you have this huge knowledge base and you started writing, which I love your books. And can you talk a little bit about why you decided to write The Inner Critic?
Sure. That was another one of those things that my last face-to-face work with clients was in an inpatient setting for women. And many of them were there as alternate sentencing. So it was a pretty intense situation. And I loved them. They were my peeps. And when my health took that turn that made me have to stop standing in front of groups or meeting with people individually, was like, I still want to be in contact with them. And it's not appropriate professionally, but I can take some of our conversations and put them out there in the world for other people to use and maybe get some help from. I'm not ready to be finished being an advocate. Is what, it's a selfish reason. I'm not done yet. And so this has a lot to do, the Inner Critic Advantage has a lot to do with the work that I did in that last inpatient setting. Once again, taking messages and turning them right side up or on their side to connect with people in a different way than they were being connected with by the traditional service providers. I don't want to insult the people, but traditional approaches. So that's kind of where this came from. There's another one in the works that has to do more with my work with SCFA that I'm not going to tell you about any more than that yet. But yeah, in my role as an advocate, as someone who had to engage community to start new programs, as a therapist, an addictionologist, I had to listen in a way that's different than day-to-day listening. I had to hear differently. And I have this wonderful gift and crazy imagination where I can take fairly complicated information and repackage it in a way that's very, very accessible and down to earth. Frankly, that's part of how I remember most of it is, I'll take something very intense and complex and break it down into very simple images and vignettes from my own memory so that it becomes incorporated, so that it's natural.
So can you talk a little bit about what if somebody asks you, well, I don't understand what an inner critic is. Could you maybe speak on that? About, I think, and when I think about the inner critic, I think of kind of the mean girl who lives in my head. But could you maybe help someone define it, or how would you define it? And then maybe share some suggestions about how we could even make friends with that bully that just kind of sits in the back of our minds.
Interesting, because when I started working on this, I obviously researched what other people had out there and what was happening. And inner critic was just starting to become a cultural thing. And I could not find anyone who was defining it, making that transition, who was defining it without using the words inner or critical. And I could see my former English teachers, with that look. It's like, you can't define a word using the word. So for me, I call it my inner you suck voice. The mean girl who lives in my head is another good one. I think what I'm going to do is read to you the way I introduce it in the book, and then we can come back to talking about some of the things we can do, because there's this whole issue of approach again that I think we don't want to let get away from us. So let me just give you how I got into it. Someday you're going to have them too, Trace.
No, I believe it.
No, the cheaters.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's coming.
I know. Okay, so we're talking about inner critic advantage, first of all. And I think most people don't think of it as an advantage. And I'm saying it really is if you can learn how to dance with it a little bit better. So we start with, what do an opinionated in-law, an annoying younger sibling, and a smoke detector with a low battery have in common? Each can be loud and extraordinarily persistent, unnerving, annoying, and sometimes inappropriate, so distracting you lose the ability to concentrate, and potentially dangerous to ignore. They're also a lot like an inner critic, that stubborn voice in the head that tells folks like you that you're flawed, somehow not good enough. It's the voice that shows up on the brink of something new and exciting, the part of you that screams stop. It's loud and unnerving, just like the in-law, the battery, and the baby. And even if you're already convinced they can be quieted, the puzzle is still difficult to solve, especially when we realize there is no simple, legal, moral, or appropriate way to get rid of them. You really want to get rid of that younger sibling, or, disconnect your smoke detectors completely, or, off your in-laws.
I was just thinking, as a person who has 6 siblings, it depends on the sibling someday.
Some days I agree.
So, yeah, how do we make friends with it? Like, how do we move into that from here's this entity, for lack of a better word, that this critical voice who is constantly, beeping or, there, to being able to, like you said, dance with it, become friends with it.
First, we have to recognize it for what it is. It really is not an enemy. It's part of what lives with us in our old brain. It's part of our early warning sign that there's some kind of danger going on. So, for example, when I needed to text you guys and say I need 10 more minutes because, I still don't know what to do with my COVID here. A little bit of it came up and said, you should have started earlier. They're going to be upset with you. The taping computer guy is going to, have somebody right behind you in his schedule, and on and on and on and on. And, the butterflies started to come. And for me, because it was you and Connor, I was able to sit down and say, what difference does it make? It's just me beating up on myself. Sometimes I wait for Trace. Sometimes I wait for Connor. I think sometimes they can wait for me, and it's not the end of the world. But my immediate reaction is something bad's going to happen if I ask for what I need.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen. You're not going to love me anymore. You're going to make me look stupid in the interview. On and on and on and on. And those are all survival things. I need my dear friends like you to live. We all have our special communities. And so the threat of being cast out of the community that's important, is a threat. And our old brain perceives that as life-threatening, because now we're out away from the circle around the fire where the bad things are. And they can get us. And we don't have the protection. So first, we want to recognize that it's one of the oldest pieces of our human equipment. It's the lizard brain. It's the fight or flight. But we try to override it with, our rational thought, which, by the way, has been around. The old brain's been around 200 times longer than the part that's capable of forming words and rational thoughts. That's why it feels like it's winning so often, is that's our go-to. That's our automatic, right? You don't have to think about it to have that alarm bell, the end of the world is coming. And if you're a survivor advocate, it's stronger because you've had those actual physical experiences where your life's been threatened.
Yeah.
Right? So it comes back quicker and stronger and harder. So the first thing we need to do to befriend it is understand it's on our side. It's trying to keep us alive. Somewhere I think I called it, it's been a long time since I've read my book. Somewhere I think I called it your incredibly loyal, protective, very stupid friend. Okay, so the lizard brain can't distinguish between traffic speeding by you on the highway and some other kind of predator. It's just like, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but after I had the accident, after I got hit from behind, I could not I was a terrible passenger, and it was really hard to drive on a highway for exactly that reason. I would start gripping the wheel with all my might and spend more time looking in the rear view than looking in front of me, because I was just reliving that truck coming from behind, smashing into me and changing things. Eventually I did a couple of things. I did some EMDR. And I bought a
Big fans.
Yep, love EMDR. And bought a vehicle with no rear view window. So for some reason, the side mirrors don't freak me out as much as, that image I had of that thing just bearing down on me. It was a 3/4 ton pickup truck, and I was in a sports car, and I was stopped, and it gave me some boo-boos. So you get the conflict between the old brain and the new brain.
Yeah.
And how to manage it. So I don't believe it when it tells me Trace and Connor are going to throw me outside of the fire where the wild animals are going to get me. Speaking of wild animals, I have dogs that want to go out, and the door's in my office. So hopefully they'll settle down, but I may have to pause you for a minute. So that's one piece. And
but aren't there like a lot of authors and like coaches and therapists that say things like, well, you can just silence that, like you can silence all of it. Yeah.
That's dumb. Sorry.
Because it feels like that is, it feels like there's if this inner critic is here to protect us, and it's part of our evolutionary makeup, and it's trying to just remind us of like, hey, there's danger, but that doesn't mean that we can't move forward. To completely silence it feels like that is not a helpful thing.
It is not a helpful thing. I thank you for knowing that, because it's part of our survival mechanism. It's part of the fight, flight, or freeze thing that has gotten us this far as a human race. So what we need to do is learn how to have a dialogue with it. There's danger, but we can move forward anyway part doesn't come from the lizard brain. It comes from the rational part, which is much, much smaller and much, much newer, and is not our default position. So if you silence it completely, speaking of silence completely, I'm going to walk around the desk for a minute, open the door so my friend's husky can go outside and not sing to us. So, a little tap dance, a little something. I'll be right back, guys.
We'll just dance around. Not a problem.
Oh, my favorite dog.
As advocates, we know all about having to balance things and think on our feet.
Juggle things.
Oh yeah, all the plates are spinning, and all the hoops are jumping, and some of those hoops are on fire. It's very exciting.
Absolutely. And the client's dog is nipping at your ankles and all that kind of thing. I was always much more afraid of the ankle biters than the Rottweilers when I was doing home visits. But So the thing, the old brain, new brain conflict really is a conflict. Obviously we want to survive, but this loyal, protective, stupid friend can't prioritize for us, can't interpret for us. It's just everything's fine, or we're all going to die. And there's no in between. So that's what our rational brain is for. That's what the different tools we use, the different things we call it, the different stories we tell ourselves, the different strategies we build make a difference and come into play on this. I also am not a fan, talking about my old inpatient role, I'm not a fan of a lot of affirmation or affirmations, because at the time most people choose to use them, they choose to use them at inopportune times for the most part. So I remember doing a class one day. I ran a parenting group and a prepare for being out in the world group. I think they called it VOCED, but at this particular facility. And one day I was feeling really frustrated and I said, how many of your case managers have you do affirmations? And every hand in the room, 100 women goes up. How many of you do them? Half the hands go up. How many of you feel like they're helpful? No hands go up.
Mm.
But the affirmations were things like, I love myself unconditionally. I believe in my abilities. Like regular day-to-day life, non-treatment, non-jail, non-whatever kinds of affirmations.
Mm.
So I said, what if I give you an affirmation that you can live with, will you use it? And a couple of people said yes. And, we did the group game and got a few more people to say yes. And we started with, I'm going to use the language we used. I don't suck as much as I used to.
I love it. That's really, I love that.
Because your subconscious mind has to be able to accept the truth of the affirmation for it to work. So I'm sitting there, my kids are in state's custody. I'm being stalked by my batterer. My caseworker's on my crap. My probation officer is saying, you don't do well in this place. You're going back to jail. And you want me to sit there and say, look in the mirror and say, I love myself unconditionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a cheese factor, I think, for a lot of our stuff. And I from myself as an advocate and a social worker and talking with advocates literally every day, advocates have we have a pretty good bullshit detector. Like we're not interested in cheesy all the time. Like, a sprinkling of cheese, sure. Like but when it comes to like what you're talking about, like it's, I think we need to have a little bit more reality. So it's that because we see so much and know so much.
And survivors in the middle of trying to sort out, if there's something they can do to make their lives a little bit different, have better bullshit detectors and will tolerate no cheese. And I think that's great. Lactose-free interventions. Lactose-free affirmations, excuse me.
And, and I think that's fair and reasonable, considering that, if you're working with the survivor, they, or the substance user or user, any of these different areas, there's sometimes a need to find the reality. And, and you're an advocate who is struggling with burnout or compassion fatigue or, vicarious trauma, or it just, and it's compounding, and you're just holding on by this, spit and will and your fingertips, having to hear, to me, like it would be the same as like having to like, well, here's your coloring sheet, or here's your, like have you taken your candlelit bubble bath, which always makes me roll my eyes, or or just the generic, are you practicing your self-care? Like that to me is like, don't come to me with that right now. So there's definitely a connection to what you're saying, and certainly what advocates are experiencing for sure.
You mean you can't pour from an empty cup?
Ah,
I couldn't resist.
Oh, the worst.
I know.
The worst. I hate it so much. Or don't put the mask on you first. One more, say it one more time. Throw this office chair. Like, no, it's the absolute worst. So I think, these, to me, it sounds like what you're saying about like affirmations is very similar to these false platitudes that, we hear. It's just so surface level, as opposed to really getting to the heart of the wound and trying to heal that space. So it's very different.
It has to do with solving the right problem,
Yeah.
being in the right reality. Okay. It's not my reality when I could go back to my home office and get comfortable. It's the reality of these people don't get it. They don't get me. My kids are with the state. And I've got to find a way to smash myself into other kinds of program pieces so I fit here and things don't get even worse.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, their cup and advocates' cups are very, very full, but just not of the things that the fluffy affirmers would like us to think about. Fluffy. We're not fluffy.
And the thing is, I really admire folks with the fluff. Like I do. Like, I'm just like, I remember being the Pollyanna and being, I remember that before I became a snarky Anna.
Snarkiana works and Snarkiana
Like,
survives.
it's that idea of like, we can still be optimistic, but we can also be real, and we can be this, we can accept both truths.
Absolutely. I just saw an interview. It blew me away. Margaret Atwood described herself as an optimist. It's like, wait a minute, you wrote The Handmaid's Tale and you're an optimist. Okay, tell me more. I want to know about, but I do know that both of those things are true. I want to back up to Pollyanna for a minute because, I used to live near Pollyanna. But one of the scariest advocacy experiences I ever had was my reunification program was placed inside of a family center. And most of my people, we had weapons policies, we had all kinds of things within my program that didn't exist in the family center. And I would sit in group supervision and hear these people say, they're not going to hurt me. I'm trying to help them. Gave me chills back then, just infuriates me now. It's like, how can you not anticipate? How can you not anticipate worst case scenario and protect your advocates from that? I didn't mean to go there right now, but
yeah,
Leanna brought it up.
But I'm so glad you did, because I think that is also a part of what we're talking about in our conference. And I think that's part of what SCFA has been talking about since really the beginning, and has been, what protective factors are we putting into place to take better care of our advocates? And and I think,
sorry, it's high time that moved from an individual problem to a community problem.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't ask, or they wouldn't do it. You wouldn't ask a police officer to go into a home with someone armed without having whatever level of protection they do. But, we go in with a notebook.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I'm thinking about that in terms also of the inner critic. Yeah. And I'm thinking about, well, no, because I think there's a connection, because I think, it's, you have this idea of this hyper, we have some advocates just expressed to me, and I also have had the experience of hypervigilance, and and how it's, worse when it's a really bad time of hypervigilance. The critical piece also jumps in. And when I was a program director, it would be, I would be, for lack of a better word, very triggered in my own vicarious trauma. And then I would be thinking that it would just be spinning out of, why am I not taking better care of my advocates? What can I do? Like, I'm not a good enough supervisor for them. I need to do more for them. They won't be hurt if I do X, Y, Z. And the reality is that when you are in that position of authority, in that middle management role, and
let's call it responsibility without authority. But
correct. Yeah. And having to manage it. And I think a lot of our folks have that experience. A lot of advocates have that experience of, not only are they worried about themselves, but now they're also having charge of a team and they're trying to also protect them. So how do you speak to that if we're trying to manage that, our own personal inner critics, but then also trying to navigate a system that frankly is pretty broken for most of us?
Thanks for the softball question, love.
Anytime.
I don't know. It was such a long time ago. I think we're doing it. I think we're starting to do it, and advocates are starting to say, with the help of maybe people not on their team or not in their agency, advocates are starting to say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not safe.
Yeah.
Or leave, when they get the ultimatums, they are taking care of themselves and prioritizing their families and leaving, which is too bad. It's always hard to lose wonderful trained advocates, but I applaud them for doing it, for putting their own safety first. We need to make some huge systemic changes. And I think those are going to be funding driven. I think those are going to be situations where we find probably initially private funders like foundations and things that require certain things. For example, when we were doing the reunification program, it was federal funds through a state agency to a private organization, but the state agency was the one who really got it in that circumstance and mandated things like time off, no 24-hour call, a couple of things like that. I mean, and the incredible woman mentor, I miss her most days, person who was leading that, checked with people in the field. It's like, what's your agency's policy? And she had a list of things that weren't okay with her, and we had a list of things that weren't okay with us. And they got written into the funding as a requirement. I think that's where it's going to start.
Mm. And I think the only thing I would add to that, I think, is for supervisors to know, who are in that spot, who's the inner critic is just beating them up so bad, and to let them, to maybe even be able to say internally to that inner critic, you're not wrong.
Right.
You're not wrong. This is hugely problematic, but you didn't cause this.
Right.
And you can do the best that you can do. And I think that's something that I try to, that I think as a person in a position of authority, that's what I have taken, with me as the executive director of SCFA, and with my students at Talladega College, and just to be able to go, okay, it's not a perfect system in all these places, but we can't fix the entire thing on our own, because advocacy doesn't work that way, but we certainly can make a dent in pieces where we can. And, and I think that but that moment of being able to say, you know what, you inner critic, you're not wrong. It's okay that it's not. And then,
well, where your inner,
say
well,
that.
I'm going to back that up a little bit. Your inner critic is correct in pointing out the danger, that this is dangerous, this is unstable, this is risky. But where we
Yeah, that's
have an
better.
issue is it's not the fault of the supervisor it's not the supervisor's fault that it's that way, especially when the supervisor has racked her brains trying to figure out 16 different ways to make this safer, you know. So yes, there's danger, and no, I didn't cause it, and yes, I would like to fix it, but I can't fix it alone. I need other people. I need other people's ideas. I need support. I need funding. I need funding. I need funding.
More funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Trace, how about some funding?
But yeah. I think
it's also that thing about, we talk about fight or flight all the time, but there's the third primarily female response, which is fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
So sometimes it gets so overwhelming that we feel totally incompetent, helpless, unable to do things. And to recognize that as part of our survival mechanism, saying, you're doing the best you can. You're not responsible for everybody. You didn't cause the damage that made XYZ happen.
Yeah.
Not like excuses or explanations, but we don't have to live there.
Grace.
Yeah, I like grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a gift. It's a gift to know that it's part of your survival mechanism. It's functioning well.
Yeah.
And we need to harness that energy and use it differently. And that's what I talk about with, that's a lot of where this comes from. If we stopped expending energy, dog's back, the noisy one. If we stopped expending energy trying to extinguish a survival mechanism,
yeah,
then we have that energy to focus on things that matter, focus on things that might work, focus on why we love what we do. I mean, sometimes we get into these conversations and it doesn't sound like we love what we do at all, but that's not true.
Yeah, we really do love what we do because it matters, and it is making a difference.
It matters. It makes a difference. People's lives get saved, and people make these incredible transformations. I have had, since I've had an author website and Facebook page, I have had several former clients get in touch and tell me about, and I live in a completely different part of the country than I did at that time. I'm not involved with any of the local organizations in that way, but they've tracked me down and they found me, and we've had some amazing conversations about what's different, about how life is completely different, and how grateful they are that we didn't give up.
Yeah.
We can't give up. We can't give up on each other. I guess that's the most important thing.
I'm so glad we had this conversation today.
Too. I love talking to you.
I love talking with you. We should do it more often.
I think so. Let's find some extra time somewhere.
2 a.m. in the morning. There you go.
That one works.
I'm so grateful. And if folks are wanting to find out more about where they can get the book, where they can find your website, where should they go and where should they look?
It's really I made it as simple as I could. It's Andrea Patten, PATTEN.com, just my name.com, or on Amazon, or Facebook, Andrea Patten author, or Twitter. I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere virtually and nowhere in reality. And there was something, oh, I also want to take 2 seconds to plug AmeliaIndieAuthors.com.
One of our sponsors, please do.
Yes, yes. And I just want to make people aware of the fact, because advocates have their own and have access to some of the richest, most amazing stories of human resiliency anywhere. And you have your own stories of how you came to advocacy or things you've learned. And so Amelia Indie Authors is about giving people voice. We are an author co-op with a very, very inexpensive, relative to publishing things, membership fee. We occasionally give away scholarships, but everybody kind of helps. It's like advocacy. Everybody kind of helps everybody out. Somebody's got a book launch coming up. It's all hands on deck in the social media. So we have 20 people promoting the release of Trace's book, as opposed to Trace doing it by herself. So I invite you to take a look at that and message me if you have any questions about it. I'm hoping that the co-op aspect is becoming a little bit more powerful, so I can get back to some of my own writing. I've taken sort of a break from that to get this started, because advocacy, my partner and I got really annoyed by all these predators in the publishing field taking advantage of people and putting out crappy product. So we said, okay, we're going to give you control of your product and direct you to some ethical people we know to help you make it the way you want it to be. It's your story. You get to tell it your way. So that's my plug for indie authors. I love it. It's my, it's another advocacy outlet for me.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And yeah. I love you.
I love you too. You are the best other New Hampshire girl I know.
Oh, 603 for life.
That's right. You got it.
Let's definitely be talking again super soon.
Sounds like a plan. Bye.